So, Moss was always going to be a tough act to follow, what with it being not only one of the best PSVR games out there, but also just a rather stunning little game in its own right. Still, considering Bravo Team's developer, Supermassive Games, was behind the excellent Until Dawn Rush of Blood, it seemed like a safe bet that the studio's latest game would at least be a semi-decent shooter. That's why, when I finally got round to playing Bravo Team for review, I was very surprised and more than a little disappointed to find out that it's not semi-decent at all. It is, in fact, unbelievably, unfathomably bad. In the following video, I'll endeavour to explain exactly what's gone wrong with Bravo Team and why, if you were putting some money aside to buy it, you should use that cash for something else entirely.
I've got your back.
555.
I'm not receiving any audio. Can you confirm you're receiving me? Give me a visual response. Over. Okay, good. I'm receiving sight, but no sound. I'll get the tech guys on a workaround right away. It's good to have you back.
Right from the off, something seems odd about Bravo Team, and I'm not just talking about the voice acting.
No. The lion is down. He's down. They just... Get to cover, Bravo Team.
It's hard to tell from this footage, but the scale in Bravo Team is completely off. If you've played Supermassive's other recent PSVR release, The Inpatient, then you'll know exactly what I mean here. In both games, your character feels gigantic. Like, here I'm inspecting my arms and my gun because they just felt weird and huge. My arms are about as thick as my legs are, and the gun felt like some kind of bulky sci-fi weapon. It's really not conducive to an immersive experience when you have to spend the first few levels of a game adjusting to things seeming out of sorts. Games like Resident Evil 7 and Farpoint were fine in PSVR. Your character felt just about the right size, and I certainly didn't have to spend the first 5 minutes of those games wondering why my hands were so massive.
She apologizes for being somewhat on edge.
As a cover-based shooter akin to a VR version of Time Crisis, Bravo Team offers an incredibly limited range of movement. This is nothing like Farpoint or Doom VFR, where you can move freely throughout the game world. But to be fair, that in itself is not a problem. There are plenty of stationary VR shooting galleries available that are great fun and totally immersive, even if they do tend to be a little dull. No, lack of movement isn't really the problem. The problem here is that when you do have to move, the game completely pulls the immersion rug out from underneath you in the most jarring way possible. Let me explain in more detail. In Bravo Team, at the touch of a button, you can either stand up or crouch behind cover, just like in Time Crisis. Pop up to shoot, crouch down to avoid fire, or reload. Other than that, your avatar's position in the world remains completely static until you choose to advance to a new piece of cover. While hiding behind this cover, there is a small sense of immersion. You can peek around corners, duck behind the cover, or hold your gun above your head to blind fire at targets. That's okay in theory, but I found that a lot of the cover was just far too large, meaning if I was crouched, I couldn't peer around it properly without risking going out of bounds of the PlayStation camera. The immersion breaking gets even worse though once you try to advance to a new piece of cover. When you select a new location by pointing at it and pressing X, your avatar will automatically run to that spot. This instantly snaps your view from first person to a static third person angle, and it's an effect that's handled terribly by the game engine. The way it wrestles control from you like this is obviously an attempt to eliminate nausea in VR, but it's often one that's prone to camera glitches that make you feel completely disoriented. There were many times where, after choosing to move, I'd suddenly find myself facing a wall, looking away from the action. Obviously, this completely pulled me out of the moment, as I was only able to regain my bearings once the avatar had reached his destination and the gameplay had snapped back into first-person perspective. Basically, the game reminds you that you're in VR every time you advance, which is absolutely rubbish for creating an immersive experience. I played Bravo Team the whole way through using only my aim controller, which I believe is the way the game was intended to be played. But to be honest with you, its implementation felt a little bit broken. Now, fair warning, this could have been an issue with my VR setup. Motion controls are not always perfect. But I don't really think it was a problem my end, because I've never had these kinds of issues with Doom VFR or Farpoint. Either way, the position of the gun on screen never really felt like it 100% matched the position of how I was holding my aim controller, and that made aiming feel rather awkward, as it never truly felt like I was properly pointing at my target. Not only that, but I also detected a tiny bit of controller lag in there, which often made it feel like my reticle was trying to play catch-up with my movements. Where aiming down sights using the aim controller was one of the highlights of Farpoint, in Bravo Team it felt so unwieldy that I ended up resorting to either hip firing or just ditching scoped weapons entirely and opting for the shotgun instead. Your arsenal is limited to 4 firearms only, all of which lack punch and feel ineffectual, even without the aiming issues. Worse still is that the 2 guns with sights, the rifle and the sniper, come with a litany of bugs. Occasionally, when crouched behind cover, the rifle just won't fire, even if you have a clean shot on an enemy through the sights. During the times this happened to me, the gun would return to firing as normal once I changed its position in 3D space or toggled my avatar to a standing position, but I couldn't find any real reason why this was happening in the first place. The worst offender though was the sniper rifle. Its scope is literally broken and will often go black for no discernible reason. Bugs and glitches aren't just limited to the guns though, the AI is also in desperate need of a good talking to. The long list of flaws I encountered ranged from enemies just straight up ignoring you even though you've just run straight past them, like this unfortunate chap here, through to your AI partner suddenly deciding to pass through solid objects. Although, if he's trying to escape the game here, I really can't blame him. I just wish there was a way I could have followed him.
You're doing great, Bravo Team.
Bravo Team's runtime is mercifully short, clocking in at around 3 hours max. To pad out the campaign and trick you into thinking it's a lengthier experience, Supermassive commits one of the biggest sins in first-person shooters by giving the game infinitely spawning enemies. One after another, Bravo Team vomits out cut-and-paste bad guys from shallow, dead-end corridors, and it just makes everything seem so incredibly unbelievable. The enemy soldiers show no real sign of intelligence as they blindly follow identical routes, routinely crouching behind exactly the same pieces of cover that tens of their friends have only just died behind. They pop up and down like whack-a-moles, and when you finally do dispatch them, another clone quickly comes along to take their place. The only way to stop this from happening is to push forwards, and at that point your enemies will helpfully fall back to another position so the conveyor belt can start all over again. It's the sort of gameplay that I thought had disappeared from first-person shooters over a decade or so ago, and in normal games it does nothing but bore and frustrate. In VR, however, unrealistic events such as waves of infinite unintelligent bad guys do nothing but remove any trace of believability from the virtual world.
On your feet, soldier! Keep pushing through the building. You're doing great, Bravo team. We're all rooting for you back at base.
Visually, Bravo Team is a dreary mess. If the primary colour in a level isn't one of 5 depressing shades of grey, then it's the type of video game brown that went out of fashion in the late 2000s. You know the one I mean, the one that reduces distant objects to a smudge and makes you feel as if you've had shit smeared all over your eyeballs. Blurry and basic textures are used to decorate the dull and imaginative scenery. There's barely any variety to the levels, and absolutely no effort has been made to make sure the world feels lived in or believable. Side streets are slapped together so haphazardly you can see the joins in the assets as you pass them by, and aside from opening ammo crates and occasionally shooting out a car window, there's no real interaction with your environment at all. Everything about the presentation here screams low-budget last-gen shooter. In fact, I'd actually group Bravo Team together with video game tragedies from the past, such as Rogue Warrior, Turning Point or Hour of Victory. It's certainly on par with them in terms of graphical styling, if not the basic gameplay. Finally, and this is probably the most valid point of all, Bravo Team is a kick in the teeth for a struggling platform. It's hard enough for VR lovers to convince others that things like PSVR aren't just Kinect-like fads, but when experiences appear that are this bad, it just reinforces people's stereotypes that VR is a little bit rubbish. Only the other week did Moss arrive to show us the true potential of the places VR can take us, and this game goes a long way towards undoing all that good work that it's achieved. Bravo Team is a disastrous effort from a development team that in the past has proven itself capable of brilliance. It fails to provide anything more than a threadbare feeling of immersion, but even that is routinely shattered by the amount of bugs and glitches present. If you were looking forward to Bravo Team, I'm afraid you're in for a big disappointment if you still do decide to pick it up. So please, instead of doing that, maybe buy Moss with your money instead, because that really is a game worth investing in. Or maybe even try out Until Dawn Rush of Blood if you haven't already, and see what Supermassive can do with the tech when they get it right. Hell, maybe even just think about donating that cash to a gaming charity like Special Effect or Extra Life, because at least then your money will be going towards something worthwhile.
Close call. If you'd been standing any closer, you'd be a goner for sure. What the hell have we gotten ourselves into? Hold fire, Bravo Team. The enemy is unaware of your presence. Prioritize stealth kills where possible.
And there you go, the bollocking is over and I can now lay my copy of Bravo Team to rest. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a like, do subscribe, and don't, whatever you do, buy Bravo Team, because that will make you sad. Goodbye.